my friends, it is now time for the Soulful Psalms segment of Beacon of Truth. The Soulful Psalms is that part of the show. We break open the Sefer Telachim, or the Book of Sung Praises, the Psalms from the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, and connect it to your everyday life. And the great thing is that this Soulful Psalm segment is now its own podcast. That's right. You can go to Podcast Central at the EWTN website. Just go to Podcast Central or listen on the EWTN app. Or you can also listen on your favorite podcast platform, such as iTunes or Spotify or SoundCloud or one of those, and listen to the Soulful Psalms every day. Now, we're going to take a look at Psalm 90, and we haven't started this psalm yet. By this point, almost a year into the show, we've at least dug into most of the psalms, but this is one we have not looked at yet. This is Psalm 90. Psalm 90 is the start of Book 4 of the Psalms. So it's Book 4, Psalms 90 to Psalms 106. And this psalm is unique in the sense that this is the only psalm attributed to Moses. Right? Yeah, that's Moses, Ten Commandment Moses from the Old Testament. And the prescript of the psalm is very simple. It's the superscript, prescript of the psalm. Prayer of Moses, the man of God. Very simple. All right? So let's dive in. I love this. I love the way this psalm starts off here. O Lord, you have been our refuge from generation to generation. I love this. Before the mountains were born, or the earth, or the world were brought forth, you are God from age to age. I love that. I love when Psalms come out just like, and David does this obviously a lot, starts praising God. He's giving honor to God right off the bat. So Moses here, Lord, you have been our refuge, right? So remember, Moses led them out from slavery in Egypt, leading them through the desert for 40 years to the promised land. And God is protecting these people. He protected them when they crossed the Red Sea. And in Pharaoh's army, the sea came back over. So Pharaoh's army followed them in. The sea came in and closed over Pharaoh and his army, and they were swallowed up. When they met different enemies in the desert, Lord protected them. He goes, but what I love about what Moses says here is from generation to generation, or in the previous Grail version of the Psalms, it said from one generation to the next. All right, so from generation to generation. So Moses understood that God protects his people not just at this particular point in time, but that this is generational. God, because he loves us, is always looking out for his people. And I love before the mountains were born, before the earth and the world, because he's going back to the beginning of creation. He goes, but I love that how it doesn't agree. The verbs don't agree here. Before the mountains were born, or the earth and world were brought forth, not you were God, you are God. See, I love that. Yeah, maybe a linguist would, the verbs don't agree. Who cares? The reality of what Moses is saying here is the beautiful part. Before any of that, anything that exists came into being, you are God from age to age, the Alpha and the Omega. Beginning and end. Why? Because God is existence himself. He has no beginning. He has no end. Time exists as a creation of God, and we exist within the framework of time. And I remember when I was, I must have been in my late 20s listening to Scott Hahn CDs back then, and he was talking about how even after we die, we're going to still experience time in a because we're human beings and we're going to have glorified bodies. We're going to experience time in a very different way than we experience it now, because the only one that exists outside of time is God, right? So I love that. And it continues in verse 3. You turn man back to dust and say, return, O children of men. I love that. Again, the word there is Adamah. In Hebrew, it's the same word that's used in Genesis chapter 2 when he talks about he formed man of dust of the ground. It says, remember, later on in Genesis 3, remember that you are dust, Adamah, and to dust you shall return. And so you turn men back to the bus and say, return, O children of men. To your eyes, to God's eyes, 1,000 years are like yesterday, come and gone, no more than a watch in the night. Right? So again, this idea that God exists outside of time, that time is under God's authority, under God's control. And again, in God's eyes, 1,000 years, oh my goodness, that's a long time. That's a millennium. But for God, nothing. Blink of an eye, just a little watch in the night. I love how Moses really shows the power of God here. The omnipotence of God. And he says again, in relation to God's relationship to humanity, you sweep them away like a dream, like grass, which is fresh in the morning. In the morning, it sprouts and is fresh. By evening, it withers and fades. So again, absolutely love that. He says that you sweep them away like a dream. Again, in God's eyes, think about it. The distance and the difference between God and humanity is even greater than the distance between humanity and an ant. Right? You think you sweep them away like a dream, like grass. You think of an ant on the ground, you might step on it, or by accident or something like that, and you don't even think about it. But God thinks about us. We were conceived and created, and before we were. Remember, it says before I formed you in the womb, I knew you deeply, personally, intimately. God knew us. So we're not just like ants before God. Obviously, again, the distance and the between God and us is even more so than human beings and ants. But unlike ants, God thinks about us. He loves us. And Moses gets that point across beautifully in this psalm.
Well, and I love your analogy, though, because think about if you've ever watched like an ant hill, like if you lay a twig or any kind of a rock, they don't just stop and go, well, I'm waiting for someone to move this rock. They find a way around it because they have their colony to go, nope, this way now, right? And that's why we have the church. That's why we have each other to lean on. And God gives us that while we're in the waiting of him moving, because oftentimes he's already moved and acted on something, but there are things or forces getting in between us and the blessing or the object that is keeping it from being the fruit. So we just think, well, God's just not listening to me. And we want to blame him because that's who we talk to about such elements of our life. But how cool is it though when he shows out and we went, man, why did I worry about that? Why was I so overwhelmed by that? Why didn't I just wait patiently to see what he was about to do?
Yeah, and that's the thing. When there are obstacles in our life, and again, God doesn't necessarily put obstacles in our life. It's just permissible. He allows it to happen. He doesn't want it necessarily to happen, but he allows certain things to happen so that we can find ways, like you said, over that obstacle, around that obstacle. Yep. And there's opportunities for us to grow, to stretch ourselves spiritually, to mature spiritually, to get to recognize how we need the help and the assistance and the love of other people in our lives. Mm-hmm. Not to keep us isolated and alone. So that it's interesting to look at life that way. Mm-hmm. We see an obstacle as an opportunity. Right. Obstacles as an opportunity. Amen. I love that. And it goes on here in the morning. Because again, Moses, just like David does, likes to use nature analogies in the way that he expresses the Psalms. So it's like grass, which is fresh in the morning. In the morning, it sprouts and is fresh. By evening, it withers and fades. So this is a wonderful analogy of our life, right? When we're young and we're spry and, kids they have almost endless energy. They're running around constantly. And you're trying to keep up with them, which is why, parents typically have kids when they're young, right? Because you get older, when you're grandparents, it's hard to keep up with the kids. But in the morning, it sprouts and it's fresh. And then by evening, right? You get into the golden years, right, toward retirement age, toward the end of our life, it withers and fades, right? So that's a beautiful analogy for life. You know, morning, it sprouts and is fresh. Evening, we get older, it withers and fades. But the whole point is God is still there with us. I love that.
For more on the Soulful Psalms with Deacon Harold Sivers, check out Beacon of Truth weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and streaming everywhere you listen to podcasts.